we are a couple of young guys in our 30s, and we're passionate about new tools, new practices that help organizations, help people in organizations move forward. And one of the things that we use is a very interesting thing called Holacracy. We're going to talk about that in the next 2 days. We're going to do some stuff today too. And yeah, well, we're here because of my connection to Greg. And last December, it was an organizational design summit here in Johannesburg, where Greg and I met. We were presenting there sort of a business case that we worked on with a client of ours, and the stuff that we come up with in that actually using Holacracy for that company. And you know, it was enough. There came enough question marks, and there was enough information there that you know, okay, that's interesting. Let's see what that, you know, exploring that more and more in depth could look like. And so we were invited here to come over and talk some more about that. What we kind of do and with Realize is we help companies to scale up, and that's an interesting process where a lot of things are happening. There's a lot of chaos, and we try to help them organize, build structure, but just enough structure that the creative processes of the people in the companies are actually continuing their growth, and the company can continue their growth in a healthy way. Let's see. Today, yeah, that's cool. Today we're going to take you with us on one of our driving questions, because one of the driving questions is, how could you design organizations in such a way that the people in the organization can fully show up at their work, fully show up in that organization. And by doing that, really serving the purpose of the organization. We think that's a fascinating question. And I think that Holacracy is, you know, it's a way to answer that question, you know, somehow. But it's a driving question, and we want you, we're going to invite you guys all to explore that question in more depth. Think along with us. What would that organization look like, and from a specific angle. And from there, the space where we arrive, when we do that, we're going to share insights about our perspective, the Holacratic perspective, and see if we, you know, where we arrive then together as a group. I think you and we all better understand the complexity of the question, the patterns of the question, and how such a complex thing as Holacracy, which is quite a challenge to offer in 90 minutes to you, how that all the little elements fit in to the stuff that we came up with together. And the other thing is, since you are all OD professionals or otherwise professionals in the training and coaching business, consultancy business, you all bring a very relevant perspective on this. And we also have Greg and Otto, who are presenting today, also their ideas. So we want to, in the next 90 minutes, we really want to dive into the driving question and see what we can bring on perspectives here and integrate that with Holacracy.
So, what we're doing today, we were asked basically to do something that we thought was impossible, which is to give you an experience of Holacracy in 90 minutes. And I'm very aware of time, like now it's 85 minutes, yeah. So that feels like, wow, that's a big thing. And we've been thinking about this. We had a conference call the other day where we were saying, well, we're not too sure. There were some simple rules for the mashup for these 90 minutes. We said, well, we might break them. And then, of course, Greg said, well, break them, go for it, it's fine. But we've been playing around with how do we actually do this. So the stuff that we're doing with you today is as exciting for us as we hope it will be for you, because it's not something that we've done many times. Actually, most often when we're asked to talk about holacracy, we will either give people an experience or do a presentation, but whichever way we go, it takes more than 90 minutes. We hope that we can give you a taste, not of holacracy as a whole, but of one of the key pieces of basically the paradigm from which holacracy comes. So almost the way of thinking that informs holacracy. So we'll not go so much into how does it work exactly, nitty-gritty details, but more what's the way of thinking behind it. And to do that, we've come up with a challenge, and we were asked to bring all of our crazy Dutchness. In fact, I felt like if we weren't going to be somewhat crazy, then you guys are not gonna, be interested enough. We had to bring some of that craziness. So we said, okay, we can do that. We'll give you a challenge. And we're kind of well known for design in the Netherlands, so we thought we'll give you a Dutch design challenge. But actually, it's not Dutch at all. Actually, I think it's a design challenge. Period. It's a design challenge for companies and organizations in the Netherlands. From what I've heard so far, it is a design challenge in South Africa and many other places. It's this question that Teun framed as: how do we create organizations that really allow us to show up fully, to use all of our potential, all of the things that we sense and that we see and that we know and that we understand and that we don't know and that we don't understand? How do we bring all of that into an organization in a way that that organization then actually can move forward, can develop for more than organizational development? We often talk about organizational evolution. How can it evolve towards its purpose, towards its full potential? So that's the challenge, and we'll go into that a little bit. I'm going to do a little bit of framing, because there's a few pieces I want to paint you a picture, not for very long, and then get you working on this design challenge in small groups for a little bit, and then from there we really want to harvest that together. Probably use that wall over there so that we have plenty of space. And from that harvest, I think a lot of interesting stuff is already going to come up. Then we'll weave in maybe some pieces of how holacracy deals with this question. But it's bigger than that. Holacracy is one of the pieces, but I suspect that Otto and Greg and possibly a lot of you have pieces of this puzzle also. This is not the presentation of holacracy as a whole. This is really a shared inquiry, which is one of the things that I put up on the wall there as my intention for today, is to go into a shared inquiry where we will obviously throw in some pieces, but we're also learning together. So the key piece of framing here is around what holacracy calls tensions. There's a lot more to holacracy, but that's the one thing that we want to focus on a little bit more just now, because we need that frame in order to be able to understand the challenge. A tension in holacracy has a really specific meaning. Often when we talk about tension, that may feel negative, like something bad. Maybe I feel tension in my shoulders, and it's not particularly comfortable, or I feel some tension in a relationship, or that's generally not stuff that we like. But in holacracy, it's actually quite neutral, and it has a really specific meaning, which is that attention is a gap between where we are now and where we feel that we could be, which is simple enough. It's not necessarily a complex definition. A gap between where we are now and where we feel that we could be. But there's something to add to that, because it's not just a kind of theoretical thing. it's not about a gap between where we are now and where we might be if, like theoretically. It's actually a sense of right now, here, I feel that it's possible for us to get a sense of tensions and of the paradigm that underlies holacracy. And that for me, that's in the room right now, that's possible. But I'm not sure if it's going to happen, because it depends on how the next 90 minutes is going to go. So I feel some tension, because I know that there is a potential in the room, and I feel it. And at the same time, there's also a current reality where we're just at the beginning, and that understanding hasn't happened yet. So that tension shows up for me as some, in this case, some tension in my belly, feeling like whoa, challenge. So that's one example of a tension. There's energy there. It's like stretching a rubber band. If you release it, it goes somewhere. There's real energy there. So this is one of the key pieces of holacracy, because in holacracy everything is about two things. The first is sensing tensions, becoming really aware and conscious of what the tensions are. So again, this is not all the theoretical stuff that we could do or might do, but the felt tension, the felt potential. So sensing them, becoming aware of them. And then secondly, processing them somehow, some way. So that's the language that you will hear us use a lot. Sensing and processing tensions. It's actually something that we do all the time. It's not new at all. It's something that organizations do all the time. But what we want to focus on today is how do organizations sense and process tensions. And how does holacracy do it? So one of the, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I'm just kind of thinking what are the key pieces I want to share about this sensing of tensions. We're doing it all the time. Like I just gave the example, maybe I feel tension in my body. I may feel some kind of emotional tension, or I may even just kind of see something that's going on. I may see someone that's, to me, looks like he's not enjoying himself, or not being engaged, and then my mind will start spinning. I will feel tension. So it could be all kinds of different things. But the key here is that for an organization, there is only one mechanism or one way that it can sense stuff. An organization is not conscious of itself, I think. This is kind of a philosophical thing, but I've never seen an organization that can kind of walk into a room and that can pick up tensions, or that can feel things, because organizations don't feel as such. So the way that they sense is through us. We are the sensors for an organization. So that's another important piece of language. Again, it's not new. It's something we do all the time, but it's just a different way of looking at it. We are sensors for the organization. We may show up in different roles and be sensing, where are we now? Where could we be with this organization? Not even theoretically, but really, where do I see, feel, sense that we could be? And what's that gap? And that's the stuff that informs us in taking action, in creating plans, in defining the strategies and the outcomes that we want to achieve. So there's tensions, and then we are the sensors for tensions. So the big question is, how do organizations today deal with tension? At least I think that's a big question. I hope you do too. For what we've seen, and this is true for a lot of organizations in the Netherlands, I expect it's true in many other places, but let me paint you a picture. In a lot of the organizations I've seen, when people sense a tension, they're a sensor, they're picking up some information, they're like, they have antennae, and everyone is tuned into a different field of information. So some people are really attuned to processes, and other people are really attuned to outcomes and results. People are attuned to maybe the outside world and the market, and others are attuned to how things are working inside in the organization. So it's all kinds of different perspectives And we all tune into different aspects. Not always consciously, but that's just who we are. So right now, what often happens when there's tension in an organization is it's resisted. It's, if possible, denied for a while at least. It's often avoided, if possible. So tension is generally not something that organizations look for or enjoy or appreciate. And if you pick up something, if there's a like a sensor, you pick up that things could be different, where do you go with that? How do you process that? You may go to your boss, but then if the boss doesn't see it, or doesn't agree, or doesn't sense the same thing, then what happens? Often that's where it stops. There are of course examples where it doesn't, fortunately, but there are a lot of examples where it does stop. If the boss doesn't see it, it doesn't exist. Other examples are you're in a meeting and you're sensing something. You bring it up, everyone else doesn't agree, doesn't see it. So what happens is they kind of outvote it. They say, well, it's not that important, it's just you, there's other stuff that's probably more important, so let's move on. Another example may be that you actually don't know how to process it and put it into the organization, and you just do it yourself. You're not going to the boss, you're not going to talk about it with your colleagues, you're just going to try to fix this problem yourself. And that may work sometimes, if it's if it's within the limits of your authority, or if you can get away with it, or whatever. But it's kind of limited too, because then it's dependent upon you taking action outside of the system, and it's not the organization making full use of what you have to offer. So that's where we want to move. First I want to just check, is that at all familiar to you, that sense of there are tensions and you sense them all the time, but they don't always get processed, they don't always get seen by the rest of the organization or colleagues. Or see a few nods, so I think fortunately, because the rest of the story kind of hinges on that. So what if we could deal with tensions? What if tensions could be fuel? Could be fuel for the organization to move forward. That's kind of a different way of looking at it. Rather than something that you resist, or that you try to avoid, or minimize, or mitigate, you actually use it as fuel to move the organization forwards towards its purpose, towards a potential. I think that would be pretty cool. But the big question is, how do you design that kind of a system? That's basically where we're going with this. And again, Holacracy offers some answers on how to do this, but with all of the knowledge that's in the room, we also want to, do some shared inquiry, do a little bit of both. Go into the question, and then also look at some of the answers. So imagine, the way of looking at it is almost that if an organization is like an engine, that uses fuel to create certain outputs, then tensions now are often almost the sand, that you would put sand in the engine. That doesn't work. It's not great. It wrecks the engine. If it's just a little bit of sand, you might get away with it. If you throw in a lot of sand, you don't. Actually, the engine stops running and starts. You have to go to the repairman, and you have to find a consultant and call them up and say, "Hey, my engine broke down. Can you come fix it?" And they might fix it, and you move on. So, what if sand, all the tensions, all the annoying things, all the problems, the things that could be different, what if tensions were the fuel for the engine? What if you had, obviously this is a metaphor, but what if you had an engine that could run on sand? And that would be different. Then you would have a system that would be continuously evolving when tensions show up, when problems show up, rather than trying to resist them or to avoid them or deny them. So that's basically where we want to go with this challenge. And to do that, we kind of created a little visual. Now, I'm not brilliant at visualizing stuff, but I think this is just gonna be enough to get a few of the pieces in. So I'll take. Can everyone more or less see it? Yeah. If not, maybe a little backwards, but I'll talk you through it. So first, there's all these tensions, and I just wrote them down as a cloud, because in a way it doesn't matter who's sensing it. Might be the CEO, might be some employee, might be someone in a management position. Doesn't really matter. Anyone in the organization is a sensor, and everyone tunes into different stuff. So that's great. But what do you do with that? So there's this whole cloud of tensions. Potentially, they could wreck the engine, or maybe they could actually be the fuel for further growth. And on the other end, there's the horizon, there's where we want to go, there's the potential of the organization, there's the purpose, what it could become, why it exists. And you basically want to always be moving closer to that, of course. So you want to be evolving continuously to get closer to purpose, to realize more of the organization's potential. And then there's something in the middle, which is the system that we use to process those tensions into forward movement, into organizational development, into organizational evolution towards the purpose. So this is kind of supposed to be a black box. And if it doesn't look like that, I'm telling you, this is a black box. And in this black box, some kind of magic happens, which takes these tensions, and what comes out is forward movement, organizational development, organizational improvement, evolution towards the purpose. And the big question is, what happens in the box? What does that engine look like that uses tensions as fuel for organizational evolution? And this is actually our challenge to you, what's in the box. So we'll dive into that and go into groups in a second. And I'm really curious to see what you think should be in the box. And then from there we'll harvest that, and then Teun and me will weave in some of the pieces that we've seen. But I'm quite curious to also see, I think actually it's not so different what we're going to find out. It's not so different what Holacracy has to offer versus what we're going to talk about in a second. So there's two important additions that I want to make. In a world that's kind of changing a lot, and it's really complex, and where it's hard to predict the future, this box needs to work its magic, but there are two conditions. One is the processing of tensions needs to be rapid, obviously, because you're picking up stuff all the time. There's no longer a market, it has changed, so there's a competitor. If you take 2 years, you're going to be out of business, probably, in a lot of industries these days. So that's one condition, it needs to be rapid. The second condition for the challenge is it needs to be reliable. So you need to know that whatever the tension is, might be big, might be small, might be the CEO, might be someone else, that it's going to be reliably and rapidly processed into forward movement, into organizational evolution. So those are the two conditions for the challenge. And we'll put these up here. But there's kind of a one-liner that catches it all. It's kind of long, but I'll take you through it. Our challenge is that we want a design for an integrated system. So it should be a system, that's the black box, and it needs to be integrated or it's not going to be reliable. So an integrated system for rapidly and reliably processing any tension sensed by anyone, anywhere in the organization. So rapidly and reliably processing any tension sensed by anyone, anywhere in the organization into what we're now calling meaningful change, or if you like, organizational development, or organizational evolution, forward movement, learning. That's kind of, like a broad strokes, but what makes a change meaningful? I think it's meaningful if it moves towards purpose. That's just kind of, let's take it as that for the moment. So again, we want an integrated system for rapidly and reliably processing any tension in that cloud of tensions into meaningful change. And we want it rapid and we want it reliable. Kind of a tall order, maybe. I hope not. Exactly. So that's the framing, and now we want to continue into group work. So you want to give the instructions?
Yeah, sure. So we're going to ask you to break out in groups of possible 6 people and talk about, we're going to do 2 rounds. And the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to talk about what would be the key ingredients. What would be the key ingredients that we really need to take into account, integrate, to come up, to actually deliver such a system, to design such a system. So, design principles, key ingredients, and just to give you some framing. I want you to look at 4 arenas, 4 areas: organizational structure, decision making, leadership, and culture. So I would say we're going to offer some flip charts on your in your group, and on there you're going to capture the ideas, the principles, the stuff that you come up with. And after 50 minutes of really diving into this question together, we're going to ask you to move from the place that you are into a new group. One person will stay at the table with the harvest, and you will do another iteration of what you see there. You can bring your perspective from your first group, and you're going to take another iteration. And we're going to give you 50 minutes each round. So
this is our way of getting back at you. For making us do Holacracy in 90 minutes. Now we're going to make you design a system in 2 times 50 minutes, which of course is entirely impossible. So we don't expect that you will kind of succeed in any way. But we just want some key ingredients. Like, if you do,
I was wondering what you're going to do with the spare 10 minutes.
Well, if you do succeed, then we'll be out of a job, so that will be better still, because then we can kick back and relax. But I suspect that you will get a lot of key ingredients, and then we'll build on that a little bit. But the key piece here is, what's in the black box. So we'll put that picture up again of what is in the black box, so that it rapidly and reliably processes those tensions into change. And to look at those 4 pieces of the puzzle. You can look at other ones if you want, but we think, just to get you started, that you need to think about these 4 things probably to get it done.
Yes.
And maybe I would suggest that we use the 4 tables in the front.
Yes.
And we'll all hand out some paper, and we really encourage you to use the paper to start writing on it, because when you switch, it will be great if you go to a table that already has a lot of stuff written down.
Yeah. I'm curious, where are you guys? Are you ready to move on to that phase?
Ready.
Together. Okay.
15 minutes then.
What about this group? This group?
Yeah.
And that group? Something like that? And I would.
Probably leadership. It's a platform for the four areas that are there. This is man's expertise. We thought that was important, and that people aren't clear, so therefore they do things rapidly, but it's not reliable because it's not done the same way as
Okay, well, structure, we look at matrix, we work with things. We know that they can be problematic and not actually work as well as chemicals.
What is this organization?
Processes was who holds that. So rapid is relatively easy if we devolve to sort of make down all the good stuff. Reliability becomes
principle that instead of thinking of an organogram as a bunch of square boxes joined with lines or dotted lines, you actually think of them as overlapping circles. So everybody's in a circle. Everybody overlaps sideways with co-workers or co-relations.
you're making decisions, you're deciding on objectives and implementation, and the people who are meant to be implementing it aren't there. They're off the strategic agenda. Exactly, so they can't put their head up to it. That might be difficult.
Structure around those. There's hardly any organisations left like Mattel Steel where just grinding out structure.
Holacracy's working process
do we wait for Exco? Do we wait for integrated Exco in the sense on the various levels? Where should the decision making take place? And so we sort of wrestle with that.
The person in the organisation has the realisation that the tension could be beneficial to me and my team and my co-workers, and not just from a management point of view or an OD point of view, but every single person needs to know that out of this tension I can probably create a spin-off that can create energy in a positive direction. And it's how you create. How do you
In
create?
culture, everybody would have to have a shared understanding.
It's when you close that gap, you potentially cause other gaps elsewhere, which is not problematic for me, but it's understanding that as soon as you intervene in one part of the system.
So Teun and me are going to just more or less harvest some stuff on the fly, and we'd like to hear from you guys in those 4 areas. So we have decision making. What does it need to look like? What are some of the principles? Organizational structure, culture, and leadership. And just because we know that you will not have completely followed the rules here, there's room for some other brilliant unspecified stuff. So some things that we want to write down that are not part of these 4 areas.
Perspectives. So it's said that in your structure you should be aware of, let's try and formalize a bit, you should be aware of...
really layer up our cultures, our structures. It's when we assume we need to have bosses for every meaningful unit as opposed to arranging around process and work.
Would that be something interesting to capture?
To encourage a culture of innovation, understanding innovation. Is that part of, and I'll tell you where it comes from. Is that
it's not a practice that you kind of add on to how things are done right now. It's actually like an update from Windows 95 to Windows, well, I don't know, where are we now? I use a Mac, but...
From Windows to Mac.
Well, maybe that's the one. Maybe that's the one, because it's not even the next iteration of the existing system, but it is actually a system that is designed differently.
Yes.
So it has different aspects, and particularly, it has aspects for all of these areas that we looked at now. And we cannot, in these 90 minutes, give you kind of the overview, but what we wanted to do was to build on some of this and to share, so what's one way of putting this principle into practice? On decision, what are we doing now to solve this problem?
Yeah, and it's interesting to get, just free-flowing here, the output of that is actions, projects, next steps, next actions.
Like to tie it into worldview language, you could say that these are 3 conversations that are happening. One conversation is about what needs to happen now to move forward, operationally. We prepared some handouts that you may not get all the language or all the detail, but I think it should give you a sense of how some of this works. So I think one of the things that's on the handout is the, it's called the integrative decision-making process, and that's actually what happens here. So that's how perspectives are integrated, which is one of the things we said is important, and where you create kind of this situational awareness so that you don't make decisions that are bad for the rest of the organization. So that's the cool piece.
Yeah, and also make sure that there's rapidly going there. So that's, so there are a couple of handouts. There are more than that. This integrated decision making is also about process intentions. But I want to, leave it here.